The early personal fortunes built on supplying millions of New World slaves with the output of essentially a jerky industry were available to anyone who was quick enough, tough enough, and smart enough to figure out how to capitalize on all that free beef roaming around on the pampas by getting it to market, processing it, and shipping it. Within a very short time, plenty of people had figured out this relatively simple business, and a few of the strongest and most aggressive began to organize it, cutting out the independent gaucho, and soon reducing him to a paid laborer or, as the gaucho looked at it, a wage slave. The early Argentines, who were getting this trade and industry organized, quickly concluded that there was much more business and opportunity available if the colonial ties with Spain could be cut. And very early in the history of Latin America, Argentina did just that, with relatively little resistance from a preoccupied Spain. Of course, many early fortunes in the western U.S., and especially in Texas, were made in almost exactly the same way, by rounding up the vast herds of wild Spanish cattle that existed then and driving them north to the Kansas railroads, where they were shipped east to feed the exploding populations of the eastern cities. The essentially free nature of this early beef, along with the discovery of oil and gas, have given Texans a style or attitude that irritates many other Americans, in much the same way that many Latin Americans are irritated with similar qualities in Argentines. However, there are some great differences. Whereas the U.S. frontier was far from the eastern cities, across a harsh and sometimes hostile land, in Argentina the frontier was a far more friendly environment. And in spite of some very real obstacles, one of the best natural seaports in the world was within relatively easy reach at Buenos Aires, so those free cattle could be rounded up, brought to market, and processed by the same group of people. This ability to link all the activities in a vast, rich ranching country with the market created by a single international seaport, finance center, and capital city resulted in the emergence of a rural landowning and an urban industrial and financial aristocracy with very close ties to each other. And this led quickly to the birth of an industrial, social, financial, and political coalition which was to lie at the core of Argentina's wealth and relative stability and at the core of some of Argentina's major social problems for many centuries to come. As an American doing business in Argentina, you'll benefit from understanding both the similarities and the major differences between how America and Argentina's national self-images have evolved under the influence of our respective cowboy cultures. It'll be especially useful to keep in mind that your Argentine associates see them as members of a very special society, represented in some ways by the strength and independence of the gaucho. The society which evolved from the free and easy life of the earliest gaucho was and is, as you may have begun to see, something far more complex than a simple cowboy culture. So if you'll keep in mind that the Argentine gaucho and the American cowboy mean similar but very different things in our two societies, you'll find that this subject always evokes interesting conversation.
One thing about Argentina that a lot of people don't realize is it's very difficult and very expensive to get loans. Money's expensive there. And if a person doesn't have a lot of money, they're not going to have the resources to go out and really develop your product or a market for your product. And that's what you're looking for, is someone in country to go out and really explode the market with your help, with your assistance, and explore that marketplace. So one thing I would look at very closely is financial stability of the company. Number two is other products that they carry or services that they carry. Are they only going to sell your product? Can they make a living doing that? Use your own business sense and ask yourself, is this going to be right for them, and is it going to be right for me? If it's not right for them, it won't be right for you.
After establishing her independence from Spain early in the 1800s, Argentina consisted basically of a crude but very effective alliance between 100 or so increasingly wealthy ranching families and the economic and social elite of a rapidly growing, increasingly rich city, Buenos Aires. From the very beginning, Argentina developed without the political and institutional infrastructure of a traditional colonial society, because Spain was fixated by the golden wealth of the Northern Americas, and England was fixated by the nearby colonies of North America. Argentina was seen by the rest of the world as a beautiful, remote, empty, wealthless land, where only farmers and ranchers went to settle. No action, no excitement, and most of all, no gold to speak of. As a consequence, no effective colonial administration, no interest on the part of the home country or its rivals for empire, anywhere else in the world. Instead, Argentina became a free-for-all society and quickly came to be ruled by independent, entrepreneurial individuals with what it took to grab enough money and power to survive in such a highly competitive world with no rules other than survive and dominate. It also became clear to those who were beginning to dominate the society that Argentina needed a great many more people than it had if it was going to keep pace with growth. And here another basic difference between Argentina, America, and the rest of the Americas emerges. While Argentina did have slavery in its earliest days, involuntary human bondage soon became unnecessary as poor, hard-working people, particularly from Southern Europe, began coming, first in a trickle and soon in an enormous stream. The word spread throughout the Mediterranean. Argentina has jobs and perhaps even opportunities. Tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands came, and almost all of them came to one place, Buenos Aires. They only went to the countryside when they went to work on the estates of the now wealthy landowners. Otherwise, they worked in the factories of the cities. Working conditions in these factories were miserable, but still the immigrants came because conditions in Southern Europe were far worse, and because Argentina had the reputation as a place where a person could make his fortune if he were strong, clever, and lucky enough. Many chose to come to Argentina rather than to the United States because when conditions and opportunities were compared in those days, Argentina actually won out for Southern European immigrants, particularly on a number of important quality of life and opportunity issues. So in the end, millions of Southern Europeans, mainly Italians, came to Argentina to settle, work in the factories, and gradually move up into blue-collar, middle-class, and upper-class status. And Argentine society today reflects the influence and contribution of these adventurous, courageous people. Now, many other kinds of immigrants came also, including the sons and daughters of some of Europe's best families, because from the very early days, well-off Argentines sent their children to the best schools of Europe, or imported the best European teachers. As a consequence, Argentine society soon became one with very clear social and economic class distinctions, and burdened to a significant degree by inequalities in the distribution of wealth and opportunity, but unburdened by the heritage of slavery.
Argentina didn't have native peoples, indigenous peoples, Indians, like other places in South America. So all the Argentinians basically came from Europe. You will see few dark-skinned people in Argentina. You won't see hardly any people of African descent. So labor, then they didn't have this large labor pool of indigenous peoples. The laborers had to come as the same place everyone else came, which is from Europe. So there's always been a premium on that. And when Perón and Eva Perón came to power, they glamorized it. Eva Perón was very famous. Now remember, they still call her today the spiritual leader of the nation. But she glamorized the working class. One of her key phrases was los descamisados, the shirtless ones. And she glamorized being that and really kind of gave a boost to the whole labor union movement.
The people who built their fortunes, families, and empires in early Argentina did so without having to account to any central government, without any restraints on their economic behavior, and without any opposition to any initiative they wanted to take. Now, in this environment, those who emerged at the top of the economic and social ladders tended to be the most ruthless, clever, and aggressive. And Argentina was dominated politically and economically for many centuries by such individuals, rather than by a government of institutions. And to some degree, this remains true today. Argentines then and now refer to this upper class as the oligarchy. And these princes of the Pampas were, and many still are, at the same time, a cattle baron, an urban aristocrat with a French townhouse, an accomplished horseman or marksman welcomed in the intimate clubs of Europe, a published essayist or poet, a major Buenos Aires landowner, and the personal owner of a significant part of Argentina's industrial, financial, or transportation complex. The importance of understanding this aspect of Argentina's history is that as an American doing business in Argentina, you'll find that business in each sector is dominated by a small elite, consisting of individuals and families with long-term historical ties to social and political influence. Now, if you're a big American company, you may be able to enter the game by forming alliances at the top. But what if you're a small company with a product or service that you think is right for the Argentine market?
Name recognition of your company is important if you're an AT&T or a Texas Instruments or anybody like that. But if you're selling a product that no one's ever heard of, or a name that no one's ever heard of, it's possible, but you're going to have to spend more time convincing a person that your product is or service is the best, and it's going to take a while to develop that. But it can be done. But do your homework before you go. Know what you have to sell. Know what your service is. Know what your product is. And because if you can't convince yourself, you're not going to convince somebody in Argentina.
Well, the existence and strong influence of the Argentine elite also means that American small business has excellent opportunities, because there's the elite and then there's the elite. In other words, the core of the elite owns and operates big business and controls the center of all the industries. But don't forget that there are many smaller players who also consider themselves and are accepted by the major players as members of the elite. This gives them social, political, and economic access to the inner circles of business, and means that for an American small business seeking to penetrate the Argentine market, a high-yield strategy might be to establish relations with individuals and families on the fringes of the elite.
If you've got a product or service that could work in Argentina, probably the highest return on investment you could get would be to spend some of your personal time immersing yourself in the culture. And my recommendation would be buy a couple of books about Argentina beforehand. Buy a tango record. Get to know a little bit about the culture. And then if you can, if you schedule a trip to Argentina, I would suggest that you take a week in Spanish and in the culture. It doesn't matter what level you're at, you would learn a lot, but also to be able to discuss your week with the Argentines would bring incredible value. I found staying with a family that I learned a lot about the culture that I never could from books. But I also found when I discussed spending that week with the actual people I was doing business with, it was a very strong statement to them, and probably had the value of 3 or 4 visits I could have made. Since then, in the States, I needed to hire a new administrative assistant, and I made a firm requirement that they had to speak Spanish. And in fact, I had a little trick of, I learned some Spanish, and I would force Spanish in the interview, which was an acid test for a lot of people who had Spanish on their resume. I ended up employing an Argentine woman who has been excellent. First of all, she's an excellent assistant anyway, but all the calls from all of Latin America have gravitated towards her. She's become a character and a personality for those people. But also she's become a window into the Argentine culture that has helped me stay crisp with my relationships there. Also, knowing that an Argentine executive can call and talk to an Argentine in the United States and speak Spanish and be totally relaxed and have someone who understands their character and the character of the country has just bought us an awful lot and helped our business in Argentina.